That was a woman I was talking to. So, she had a very low voice. Probably a smoker. So.
This guy and this guy are two dramatically different characters. For about 6 seasons of Steve Carell's tenure on The Office, Michael Scott is a near completely static character. He evolves, but very slowly. He grows in the very little ways Michael Scott does. But for one single season, Michael Scott was someone very different. The US version of The Office was developed by Greg Daniels as an extension of the 12-episode British miniseries starring Ricky Gervais as David Brent, a hilariously mean-spirited, depressed, nearly functionless human being whose world was built around dark humor with a splash of the early makings of cringe humor. The first season of the US Office's 6-episode run attempted to recreate that edge, that very same angle, and the show was almost immediately cancelled. Paul Feig would say later in an interview that it was a miracle the show wasn't removed from air and that the support of NBC exec Kevin Riley is the only thing that saved it. Why? Because they f***ed Michael Scott.
That's what she said.
That's my joke. Damn.
I touched on this briefly in an earlier piece I did about The Office, but I think it's worth diving into deeper. Michael Scott in season 1 had to be changed in 4 visible and important ways to ensure the show's survival, and some of these changes are more obvious than others. If you had a hard time getting into The Office, well, these may very well be the reasons why. Michael was originally a totally unlikable, unoriginal caricature, and it was only once this was acknowledged by the show's writers and creator that it began to change. Maybe unsurprisingly, it starts with the superficialities of Michael Scott. You might have noticed that this Michael doesn't look exactly like this one. And that's because, well, first impressions in television are everything for a character, and Michael looked like a skeevy cartoon car salesman. It wasn't working. They slicked Carell's hair back in season 1 to give him a balding look. They dressed him in oversized clothing and left the blazer at home, tightened his collar up to give him the appearance of being slightly overweight and having a double chin, and gelled his scalp until the shine could be seen off the top of his head 3 shots away. This was all in an attempt to make him look like a more nefarious, more mean-spirited character, almost like a villain. The show's producers acknowledged this was not going to work for the character long-term if they wanted audiences to care about him. So, Season 2 introduced the new and improved, apparently Rogaine-using Michael Scott. More presentable, better dressed, less offensive in appearance. But this was just the surface. Where the real changes were made were in how moments like these are handled.
Try my googie googie. Try my googie googie. Try my googie googie. Try my...
This is the end of the Season 1 episode Diversity Day, maybe the show's most famous episode. There is no redemption here for Michael Scott. The moral of the episode, by the time it ends, is that he's awful, and that's that. The only moment of audience redemption comes here between Jim and Pam. It was a mean-spirited way to end an episode of a television show, and this approach apparently left a sour taste in the mouths of audiences, and their view of both the show and Michael's character was that of bleakness. The dark British humor not translating well to American audiences wasn't necessarily the issue. It was that the producers wanted the show to be on air for far longer than 12 episodes, and were too closely trying to replicate Brent and pursue that reality. Here's the end of the final episode of that first season, Hot Girl.
I probably should have told you I don't need a ride now because Jim can take me home after, so you're off the hook.
Okay, great. Off the hook.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, cool.
I got this.
All right, have fun.
Thank
Don't
you.
drink and drive.
A conscious decision was made from here on out, this very moment, to give the show's episodes more optimistic endings than this. To provide the audience with happier moments and give Michael an aura of humanity, whereas the UK Office ends with Brent's literal firing and his lowest point, from here on, Michael would end each episode happier. The aforementioned Paul Feig, former writer on the show, points to this moment in the Season 2 episode Office Olympics with being the aha moment of that optimism, stating that these were the moments that would make Michael Scott human, and the good feelings that would keep audiences around for more than 12 episodes. They leave their couches with a smile. So from Season 2 on, more optimistic endings were in. But there was a bigger glaring issue that producers believed had to be causing the show's poor reception throughout that initial season. Michael was not the world's best boss. In fact, it was entirely unbelievable to audiences that he even continued to have and keep his job. In the context of a mockumentary, the entire purpose of the format becomes believability in the gimmick. Therefore, if audiences don't believe in Michael's ability to run the office, they'll check out of the concept and in turn the show altogether. And I think this moment in the season 2 episode, The Client, is a direct response to that criticism.
Well, corporate's gonna go ballistic, but you think we could, Jan?
See, season 1 Michael, throughout all of his mean-spirited fake firings and offensive attacks on nearly everyone in the office, also fails to accomplish, well, essentially anything. In The Client, on the other hand, Michael continues to be Michael. He interrupts the meeting to call Pam to feed him a joke, he brings up Jan's split from her husband repeatedly, and he derails conversation for what seems to be hours.
Baby back ribs.
And then, he closes. He accomplishes something, a trend we'd see carried forth throughout the years post-season 1, as Michael flails around in sheer chaos, while somehow still getting the job done. This post-season 1 approach is why you see characters like David Wallace bring Michael in for tips on how to run the other branches. It's why you see Michael semi-successfully lead a competing paper company. Michael's momentary competence gives the show's writers the leverage and the space to encourage Michael's more ridiculous behavior. If he was doing this in the office and failing at his job, he'd become near instantly unlikable, because we the audience like Pam and Jim and Stanley, and we know branches are closing, and we as the viewer want that branch to succeed for their sake. If Michael was consistently playing with their livelihoods, we the viewer would grow tired of him. We'd resent him, he'd become a villain. So, Greg Daniels told his writers that from season 2 on, Michael had to be a more competent boss.
Thank you, Michael.
And it worked out. But I think the most important changes to Michael Scott made between season 1 and 2 are the changes that gave him a true character arc and stimulated his development as the most likable idiot in television history. This was the result of 2 decisions, and the first was more of a logistical choice. Michael Schur, former writer on the show, has spoken about it time and again. 10% was the idea. The show's cast would be 10% nicer to him after season 1, because this, all the time, wasn't going to work. And this was a sort of intangible change that happened slowly over time, but it was integral in shifting the audience's disposition towards Michael. If the characters we are attached to, the Jims and Pams, absolutely resent him, we are far less likely as viewers to change our opinion of him. So the 10% rule was put in place, but what really humanized him was the show's approach to relationships. In the first season, we only see Michael the boss. And the second season makes a concerted effort to give Michael relationships that he can grow around. Now, Jan and Michael's relationship is obviously just sad. It's one-sided, it victimizes Michael in a way that makes us feel for him, but it gives him little to no reason to develop as a character. Jan is, surprisingly, an even worse influence on Michael than he is on himself. Instead, it's Holly Flax, who doesn't arrive until season 4, that sparks the most character growth in Michael, and best represents that 10% motto.
I'm MC Max Scott, and I am hot. She's DJ Jazzy Flax, and she is the best.
Ironically and obviously, with her replacing Michael's foil in Toby. Holly shows us the audience that Michael can be loved and should be loved. Holly gave Michael a reason to mature, a reason to not read her unsent email to him, a reason to remove the toxicity from his life, a reason for him to be more comfortable and secure with himself. When we see a non-assuming, likable character like Holly fall for someone like Michael, we subconsciously view him as a more likable presence. And this is maybe the most dramatic change from season 1. In that season, Michael develops very little. He has very little to live for, and the attitude of those around him represents that. But there's a reason season 1 Michael, from his looks to the way his day ends to how he's treated and treats others, never makes it past those initial 6 episodes.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He's ruined. He's butchering it.
I think part of the reason I find this also interesting enough at least to expound upon something I've already touched on, is because there's a widely held belief that the original 12-episode run of the UK Office is dramatically better than what the Steve Carell version offered. But I think if you look at both series in their totality, they are two very different versions of what it means to be the world's best boss. What Michael Scott accomplished was a transformation from something that everyone thought he should be, a David Brent, into something that was uniquely, well, Michael Scott. And I think that's the most important takeaway from the first couple seasons of the show. Sometimes it's better to be unique. It's better to be something different than it is to try and fit into a mold you'll never quite be able to squeeze into as well as someone else. So maybe stop trying to be them. It took Michael Scott a few episodes, but he just might be proof that the best way to be a success, to be the world's best boss, is to get a little bit of Rogaine and be yourself. And yeah, you're probably gonna need a little bit of luck.
I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Nerdstalgic. If you enjoyed it and want to see more stuff like The Office, make sure to press that like button down below. Also, press subscribe so you never miss an episode of Nerdstalgic. Also, if you hit that little bell next to the subscribe button after you press that, it will make sure you're actually notified when I upload on this channel. So yeah, hit subscribe and the little bell. It's very helpful. And on your screen right now are 2 more episodes of Nerdstalgic. You can click on those to check those out, and I'll see you guys in the next video.